Hello and welcome to Ohio Stadium, home of the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm Tom Orr. He's Tony Gerdeman. Tony, there's a football game tonight. Are you aware of who Notre Dame is playing? Did I just step on the punchline? Look, maybe, I don't know.
Tom, leave this stuff to professionals, please. Yes, here we are. I am excited to see Ohio State host Notre Dame here at on Safe Flight Field at Ohio Stadium. Lovely Saturday, overcast skies, perhaps some rain. The lights are on. I have been told after asking, could we have the windows open? We might get the windows open because I would like to be able to enjoy the atmosphere, even though it is a nice, cool, probably like 68 degrees in here.
Yeah, it is. Box. And for the first of what will probably be 17 times due to people asking the same question, we'll go through very quickly the weather, because that is sort of been a little bit of an ongoing concern for folks tonight. It rained a little this morning during college game day. It's sort of sprinkled on and off a little bit in the afternoon. Right now, as of right now, according to weather.com, it looks like about 5:30. Thunderstorms, whatever thunderstorms there are, should be through. We are safe inside the press box, so we are exactly where you would want to be during a thunderstorm at Ohio Stadium. And then after that, it looks very much like until maybe 11 p.m., like maybe fourth quarter, something else comes up. But unless the forecast changes, it seems like this is probably going to be a fairly good game weather-wise. Who does that favor?
Well, I think good weather always favors the more talented team, in my opinion, because poor footing evens things out. And we should probably maybe talk about the footing, that it was a subject this week with Jackson Smith and Jigba, Travion Henderson. I wrote about it a little bit today with the new turf, how everybody really, really likes the turf and they trust it and they can cut on it. And they slipped a lot last year. Some of the players would start to complain about it and then would catch themselves. Like I think, I don't know if it was Jackson, Travion talking about how we slipped a little bit on it last year. It was like a little bit of times.
Speaking of slips.
Yeah. And so they all really like this turf. They practice out on the field, I don't know, maybe 5-6 times, and then also have the same turf inside the Woody. So even if there is some rain, you'd think it would be okay. And we've seen this team perform well in the rain before. Although I am interested, does rain on a new turf, is it slicker? Is it like dealing with a new football? Like how is that impact?
You would think, last year the turf was it was always kind of like matted down and you'd see people sliding on it. You would think that new turf, it's going to be standing straight up. It's going to be pretty much, it's going to be a little more rigid. It's not going to be as UV from the sun breaking it down and snow and rain and all that stuff over years and years and years. It should be a little, not sticky. Sticky's not what you want. Sticky's bad news for knees, but not slick, I think is the big thing. So yeah, I think that's going to be a big, I think that's going to be something where Ohio State is maybe even a little more glad that they have new turf than they were before.
I will say I have seen, and I tweeted this out yesterday, I have seen so many interceptions on dropped passes that go right through a receiver's hands, that if there's rain, that could be an issue tonight, more so than quarterbacks throwing. It's just catching the ball first game, timing, all of that stuff. It's like I've seen it too many times already, like as many times as you might see it in a season. I think we've seen it in this second opening weekend.
Yeah, the backyard brawl had a real notable one of those. Ball went off of the West Virginia receiver's hands right to a Pitt defensive back who ran it back for a game-clinching pick six. If that happens, you would think Ohio State's receivers are probably a little more sure-handed. You would think C.J. Stroud is probably a little more accurate than Tyler Buckner. So, that's probably, if it is an issue, it probably is not a big issue for Ohio State.
Yeah, I think poor weather may favor Ohio State as well because of the talent and the quarterback and the experience that they've had in dealing with it in this stadium.
Yeah, and we're going to have time to go through a whole lot of stuff. I wanted to start though. We're planning to go till 6:00. That may be contingent on situations that I'm in the press box that are out of our control. This is a full house. Every seat has game notes and all that kind of stuff. There's NFL teams up here. There's media outlets from all over the place up here. So yeah, they are. We will at some point probably get booted out of here, but our plan is to be here for 2 hours. So before we get into the game and start diving really deeply into the game, I just wanted to talk about just the atmosphere around campus today. I don't know how much you got to walk around, but I mean, I got here at like 10:45 this morning, went to game day. There was a big crowd at game day for a rainy morning, 9 hours before kickoff. And you walk around the tailgating lots, and, the ones that are real close to the stadium were the reserved spots. There's still a bunch of empty spots. The ones where you had to, first come, first serve. Kevin and I walked out and then went to a tailgate from some BuckeyeHuddle.com members on kind of the ag campus. Shout out to Ryan and Adam. Buffalo chicken dip, delicious. But they were saying they got here. The lots opened at I think 6 o'clock, and by 6:10. The lot was like 80% full. Like by the time they got in, it was like 10 minutes after the lot had opened, and it was already like 80% full. I mean, I think that's indicative. And you walk around, and it's like there are game days where there's not, there's people, but there's not a ton, and it's not, it's not crazy. Mm-hmm. The lots are pretty full. The lots have been full for hours. This is Ryan Day talks about you come to Ohio State to play in big games like this. This is like everyone has come to Ohio State today for a big game like this.
Yeah, I think I rolled onto campus about 2, took a different way in to avoid some of the traffic that I knew was going to be there. Even though I normally get to campus like 4 hours before the game, here I'm here like 5.5 hours before the game. But you're walking through stuff. It was like I was 2 hours before the game. It's like it's all ready. Everything is going. And the people are all there, and this is well after game day was over, so it's not like a product of that. It's just everybody is on campus. I saw a lot of older alums walking around and just taking it all in, and even parking I had to park on another level up than I normally do just because. And it's like I'm here way earlier than I ever am before, and didn't matter. So there's a lot of anticipation, not just from the fans but the media as well, because. That's who's parking in our garage.
In addition to the weather, another question we're probably going to get 17 times over the course of the show is how many Notre Dame fans are there? What's the breakdown of fans? There are a lot of Notre Dame fans out there now. Based on history, generally the out-of-town fans are going to show up earlier because the out-of-town fans are there from out of town, and you get booted out of your hotel at noon or whatever. So you go, you tailgate, you walk around the campus, you're there earlier than if you're coming from Hilliard or Upper Arlington. Well, okay, we can roll in 3 hours before the game, 4 hours before the game. So generally, the early arrivers are kind of overly sampled for the visiting team.
Yeah,
but there's a good number of Notre Dame fans.
Yeah, no, there is. Walking around the stadium to get to the gate, like there's just a lot of people waiting around, talking, and definitely a lot of Notre Dame fans, more than you normally see. Mm-hmm. Certainly more Notre Dame fans than you usually see in an Ohio State game.
There was one single solitary guy in a Michigan jersey at College Game Day this morning, who we'll do a segment from College Game Day a little later on in the show. Just sort of a behind the scenes kind of thing, like what is it actually like to watch College Game Day when it's on campus? And the segment starts with, I hit record just to start, and immediately they start playing a Jim Harbaugh segment, and everyone starts booing really loudly. It's like, well, that's not for me. And then there was a Michigan fan standing right in front of me, and he seemed delighted. Everyone else seemed not that thrilled.
I think that might actually be a very good fantasy football last place punishment, where you have to go to an Ohio State game day in a Michigan jersey.
An Ohio State Notre Dame game day.
And just deal with it. Like, here you go. It's like throwing somebody out, in their underwear. Like, I've at it, everybody, and then you just got to take the abuse. And maybe like have stuff like taped on the back of your jersey or whatever, like Ohio State sucks, stuff like that to really rile the people up.
The college football equivalent of one of the opening scenes of the third Die Hard movie.
Correct.
If you remember that, yes. So we've talked a little weather. We've talked a little atmosphere. I guess it's time to talk a little football. I've talked to Ross Fulton on the morning show a little bit about this. We've talked about this a good bit. I talked to Kevin about this earlier in the week. It feels like there's a lot of reasons to think that Ohio State has advantages in a number of different spots. Notre Dame is a very good, solid team, but they just, as a program, have kind of bumped up against a glass ceiling, I think, a little bit. When you get to a certain level of the sport, like they are very good. They can, they're churning out 10-2 kind of seasons, and they are a top 10 to 15 team, certainly most years, and you'll sometimes have a year where they get into the college football playoff, and then they get into the college football playoff, and it goes kind of the same way. And with a first-year coach, with a first-time starting quarterback, starting on the roads at night in a hostile atmosphere, it sort of feels, and we had Notre Dame fans accusing us of just completely dismissing Notre Dame, but it feels like, unless there's something we really don't know, it feels like Notre Dame may bump into some of the same issues that they have historically in kind of big games like this.
Well, I mean, they haven't increased their talent exponentially, not exponentially, but like much since last year or the years before that. So you would expect that when they run up against teams that have talent like Ohio State, like talent like they run into in the playoffs, then the results, there's a trend there, and it's a fact. it's history at this point, and I think can Ohio State live up to that history is maybe the big question there, but there's no reason. I mean, Vegas certainly isn't expecting a nail biter. So if we're the only ones that are, we're not on an island thinking that, if Notre Dame wasn't Notre Dame, where would they be ranked right now? If they weren't known as Notre Dame.
Yeah, if you didn't have the shiny helmets, you didn't have the brand. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because they recruit well.
Mm-hmm.
They recruit, very well, but they're not. It feels like this year in the sport of college football, there's like one tier that's 1 through 3, and it's probably Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, probably in that order. And then, you look at a lot of the advanced analytics systems, and the gap between 3 and 4 is the same as the gap between 4 and 15 or 4 and 16. It's an enormous gap between 3 and 4. And it feels like that's kind of been the story of college football the last few years, where you get to the college football playoff and it's like, well, who's the number 1 seed that has a bye in the first round and is going to play an Oklahoma team that is deeply flawed and is not going to be able to hang with them? And Notre Dame has been that 4th seed, once or twice, I think, where there's a gap. And I don't, week 1, there are always questions. Week 1, there's always, well, what if something weird happens? And you can't discount that. But, if the weather kind of cooperates, that feels like that eliminates one of those concerns.
It's interesting because you really don't want to open up against Ohio State as your first game of the season. You would like to have a warm-up. However, if you're going to play Ohio State, you would want this to be Ohio State's first game, so you don't want Ohio State to have this warm-up. You want them to be figuring things out a little bit, learning things on the fly. So there's this dichotomy of it's the best time to get them, but it might not be the best time for you. But overall, like if anybody's going to do it, it's the best time to start the season. And then it just comes down to the reliance on all of this experience that Ohio State has that Ryan Day keeps talking about. All the young players that saw action last year have stuff that they can turn back to and get through this kind of game. But yeah, I think Notre Dame playing Ohio State in September would be much different than, say, October, November in terms of what to expect from Ohio State. I think my score would be vastly different.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. And, you also have the question of health, and we will be able to share the availability report with you at 5:30. So you'll want to stick around for that. We can kind of tell you who's out, who's going to be a game time decision. That'll be at 5:30 Eastern. But, Ryan Day earlier in the week kind of said, he didn't exactly say, but he sort of implied that they're feeling pretty good about the health of the team right now. By the time you get to October, someone has broken something, someone has sprained something, someone has twisted an ankle, whatever it is.
Quit the team.
That is also a thing that can technically, yes, happen during a night game, yes. But you do have
I'll give you some. Who is the most likely Buckeye to quit the game tonight, Tom? If you would like to tell the people. Is that a no?
Tony might be fired. I don't know if that's the same as quitting, but it does feel like Ohio State being in relatively good health from everything that we know right now. That's probably something that's going to work in, Notre Dame it has an offensive lineman who's kind of banged up. It was their starting center is kind of, it sounded like kind of 50-50-ish to be able to play. That alone, we're not aware of any Ohio State starters who are definitely out. If Notre Dame is, a starting offensive lineman, that's supposed to be one of the strengths of Notre Dame's team is, they have elite wide receiver play like Ohio State does, but they should be able to run the ball. You've got a pretty good offensive line. You got a pretty good tight end. But you're going to have to, if you're losing your starting center, that is a big red flag to me. And again, we don't know if he's out.
Yeah.
But if he's not 100%, that's a concern because we've heard a lot about the interior of the Ohio State defensive line getting some work done against the interior of that Ohio State offensive line.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I remember watching Mike Hall pushing Luke Whippler back and getting past Luke Whippler to see just one example, a redshirt freshman making plays on the defensive line for Ohio State. But then it comes down to if the starter is 70% and the backup is 100%, which of those is better? And right now the backup center would probably be the backup left guard who has started like a half a dozen games, or maybe it's the actual backup center, like the second team center. It just depends on, Ohio State does the same thing in terms of who is the backup center. Probably Matt Jones, something like that. And so Notre Dame's got their own guys that they trust. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see which level they prefer, the 70%, 60%, or 100%. And maybe through the power of GameDay heals a lot of ouches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The adrenaline that gets going on GameDay this is not just, it's the first game of the season I want to play. This is a game. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba talked about since he was a recruit, this is one he's kind of had like, oh man, I can't wait to play in that game. And I'm sure he's not alone in that. Ohio State is something of a measuring stick, especially around the Midwest, certainly. And, Notre Dame, proud ACC program Notre Dame, famously located in the Midwest, believe it or not. So, and these are schools that will bump into each other on the recruiting trail quite a bit. And, guys probably, the Eichenberg family Liam Eichenberg is now gone from Notre Dame, but the Eichenberg family, Liam Eichenberg was an offensive lineman at Notre Dame, Tommy Eichenberg, a linebacker at Ohio State right now. So you have a lot of kind of overlap from a lot of those Catholic high schools in Cincinnati and Cleveland. And, Tommy Eichenberg, I asked him this week, so, what is your brother giving you all sorts of grief this week? Is he talking trash? And he said, no, he wasn't sure if Liam owned an Ohio State shirt, but he said he would be disappointed if he didn't wear it. But he said he's kind of he basically tries to not talk football with his family. Even his brother, who plays at a very high level, he tries to not talk football just to kind of maintain that focus. He's an interesting character on this team because he's someone who I think last year, Ohio State fans were not, the linebacker play last year was not outstanding. And, Steel Chambers played well, and I think people were willing to sort of excuse Steel Chambers a little bit because it was his first year and he'd just moved over from running back and all that. Tommy Eichenberg felt like he got maybe a little more grief than he deserved last year.
But did he say that?
No, this is me speaking.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. We have left the Tommy Eichenberg said out loud portion of this. He may have felt that. I'm not sure. He's obviously trying to filter out the outside noise.
I'm sure many Buckeyes have felt that.
Yes, he is though someone who, going into this year, he and Steel Chambers. It was a little surprising to me in camp how quickly I thought linebacker might be like a little bit of a positional battle, and we really didn't have a positional battle almost anywhere that we were covering around the field. I was a little surprised at how quickly the linebacker position got itself resolved.
Yeah, and Jim Knowles was speaking highly of Tommy Eichenberg pretty early on in his tenure, and it's like, well, okay, we'll see what happens during camp and Cody Simon is healthy. And it was never like, this has always been Tommy Eichenberg's defense, basically. It's like Jim Knowles moves in and Tommy Eichenberg moves next to him, and they just run the roost, basically. And so, I think fans will, they will have an opportunity to change their opinion based on how he plays, obviously. And I guess I hope for his sake that everything that the fans used to think of him is in the past, and let them form their opinions based on what he actually does this year and how he does it. Last year, he didn't play his first 2 years. He's a redshirt sophomore last year. Didn't play, and he was thrust into action, kind of like Steel Chambers. The guys in front of him, the older guys, weren't working out. Taraji Mitchell, Dallas Gant, Kayvon Pope, like those guys should have been playing last year, and so Tommy Eichenberg did his best, started the first 3 games, and has done everything that you can ask. And now Jim Knowles is asking him to make more plays, and if a linebacker makes plays around here, they become legends.
Yeah, and what Jim Knowles is asking the linebackers to do this year is a little different than what you've seen them ask linebackers to do in the past. I've had Ross Fulton on the morning show several times. He talks about it as spill and kill, where you're trying to, the defensive line is trying to just basically clog up the middle, force that running back to bounce outside, and then let those linebackers make plays in space, get that guy down to the ground in space. That requires some short tackling, that requires some good burst. But, one of the things that, you can be quick, you can be fast, but we have seen Ohio State linebackers in the past. I'm thinking back to like the 2017 season where it was like, yeah, they're really fast, but when they get confused and go the wrong way, that just means they're further out of position. This year with Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, it feels like, Jim Knowles is very confident in pretty much everything right now, which we'll get to that in a minute. But, it seems like he's very confident in these guys knowing where they're supposed to be, and that lets them play fast, which is really one of the big goals.
Yeah, it says Tommy Eichenberg doesn't make mistakes. He's quick at diagnosing the plays. They're now able to anticipate rather than react, which makes them faster. And so then it just comes down to making the tackles pretty much. And I was watching highlights of the Oregon game last year where linebackers were just running all over the place and never, rarely in the right place. And there'd be pulling guards with nobody to block because there was no spilling, certainly no killing. And it was just, I don't have another illing word for you, but it was not good. They were willing, but they weren't filling. And this year, Tom, it sounds like they are. They are willing to be filling and spilling and killing.
Grilling, yes, our resident smoking, brisket expert, Kevin Noon behind the camera. Oh, of course, throwing in grilling. Yeah, last year things were going well for Oregon. This year, not so much. Georgia up 14-0. They were up. They scored their second touchdown 5 seconds into the second quarter. So the Georgia-Oregon game has already beat the game total for the Iowa and South Dakota State game. Yes, which. So there have been a lot of great moments this season already. I have I'm basically that 50 Shades of Grey meme where it's like I have unusual tastes and show me, and it's like me holding up the box score of the Iowa South Dakota State game, because I walked out of the press box and the game was 3-3, and then we were going out and going to some tailgates and meeting some site members from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up today, and came back and looked at the final score, and it was 7-3. I was like, wow, that was really close, gross win for Iowa. Wait a minute. They had 3 when I left. Yes, they basically did the spiritual equivalent of the old 6-4 Iowa Penn State game. Is it possible that there's someone in the state of Iowa who might be a better offensive coordinator than Kirk Ferentz's kid?
Well, that's a crazy thing. There isn't. It's not just Iowa. It's the entire nation. Maybe got to cross the ocean and see. I don't care which ocean. Cross any ocean. Find somebody that can actually lead an offense there at Iowa. I think what happened to Spencer Petras, their quarterback, a pair of 2-run shots.
Yeah. I mean, does South Dakota State have a bullpen issue is my question. Because, I mean, you
clearly.
Yeah. Give up a couple runs in the late innings. That's
well, when your name is the Jackrabbits, you're going to give up some long ones.
Yes. You're going to give up some. Yes. Well done. Well struck.
Grilling.
So we have a couple. There's a whole bunch of reasons that tonight is a big game for Ohio State and Notre Dame. I mean, you've got the top 5 thing, you've got the season opening thing, you've got the primetime game thing. It also is they're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 2002 national championship team, and Jim Tressel and Will Allen and Mike Doss and someone else, two other people, Will Allen, Mike Doss, Jim Tressel. They were on College Game Day on
the
Saturday
artist
morning.
of the sculpture was there as well.
Maurice Claret.
Yes. No, he did not. He was not the artist.
Famously not important player on the 2002 team. Yes, Maurice Claret. Yes, he was there as well. This is one of these things where we go to road games and it's like, oh, it's the 27th anniversary of the 1990 Indiana Copper Bowl team, and everyone stands up and cheers. This is Ohio State is you gotta really do something. You at least win the Rose Bowl, at least in the olden days, and now it's probably beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, at least make it to the college football playoff, at least, and maybe more than that is sort of the threshold for being recognized. It has been a while. I think Jim Tressel got recognized, and the 2002 team got recognized in the 2012 Michigan game. I remember that. But this is going to be just one more little thing that's going to make this a pretty good atmosphere tonight.
I believe that is at the end of the first quarter is when that is happening. Yeah. So that was another reason why I'm hoping to have the windows open to hear the crowd recognize that team, which continues to live in history at Ohio State. Everybody has stories about that season in terms of where I was when this happened, or I knew it was over this time, or just the torture and sheer pain of so many of those games, and just like, why does this have to happen to me? Oh, this was great. This is the most amazing thing. But then when you try to relive it by watching the games on YouTube or ESPN Classic, there are very few moments of joy in any of those games. It is a tough watch.
It is Brian Ferentz before Brian Ferentz. It was Jim Tressel adjusts hipster glasses. 7 points. That's if you say so. That was. You think back to some of those classic games, the Purdue game that year, and it's like everyone remembers that game for one play, only one play. What was the other 59 minutes and 52 seconds like? Well, we're out of time. Yeah. Sorry. We fortunately are not out of time. We've got we're going to be going till probably approximately 6 o'clock. I want to give you sort of a sense what to expect when we're doing these pregame shows this year. We're doing stuff a little different. We're getting a little more adventurous with our pregame shows now that we've done these a few years. We're going to start bringing in some segments from other folks who are part of the team at BuckeyeHuddle.com. One of them is Kevin Noon. He's right now, but we're going to have some pre-produced segments where Kevin was out earlier today. We mentioned the scene around the Ohio State campus, and just how active, how loud, how enthusiastic everyone is out there right now. Not just Ohio State fans, Notre Dame fans as well. It is Kevin and I went over to one of our members' tailgates, and so he has a little piece from there.
We're here in the tailgate lots over on West Ag campus right now. Hooked up with some members from Buckeye Huddle, of course, just visiting their tailgate here briefly. Just wanted to give you all a little bit of flavor of the event as we get closer to the game. It is just shy of 3 as we're recording this. Tailgating is alive and well. Found out some lessons today about how it goes down. You get here early, like on Thursday, lock it down and hold on for dear life. And then people have been here all morning. We got all the finest food wares and everything else, and of course plenty of coolers full of alcohol. It's a little bit of a rainy day here still at this point. A lot of precip in the air, but nothing too terrible. As you can see over there, lots of TVs. You can't have Saturday football without television or power. Hopefully all of the generators are not blowing me out on audio. Turn this around right here. So, tailgating is big business here at Ohio State, especially for a 7:30 game. You have all afternoon to sit there and eat and drink and sleep. Beer, liquor, whatever you want right now. So, we wanted to just do a little quick scene from the tailgate lots to give you an idea of what's going on. We'll go much more in depth here on a later show. But until then, back to Tom and Tony.
All right, well, thank you to Kevin for braving the tailgate lots, maybe eating some free food from some wonderful BuckeyeHuddle.com members. Had a really nice time hanging out with those guys earlier. Tony stayed inside the press box, fighting with a minor technology issue. And
I was planning to go, but as soon as I got to the press box, opened the computer, it shut down. And I was having very major issues. I had to reboot all of my Windows stuff, lost a bunch of preferences and settings. So it's not like I was just calling off. I really had I thought things were going to go bad. I thought I was going to have to run to Micro Center and get a laptop before the game.
Well, glad it worked out. Sorry you couldn't be a little more sociable. It's all right. despite Tony's best efforts, the rest of the team at BuckeyeHuddle.com is really fantastic. We're actually going to be showcasing a whole bunch of our team during this pregame show. Later on, we'll have a behind-the-scenes segment from College Game Day. We've got Devin Radcliffe, one of our X's and O's gurus. He's going to give you a little schematic preview of the game to just so you know. I mean, this is like when I have Ross on the pregame show or on the morning show. It's a great opportunity to sound a little bit smarter in front of your fans. Everyone needs a smart football. 3 at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We've got Justin Whitlatch, we've got Devin Radcliffe, we've got Ross Fulton covering the team, Kevin Noon, Tony and I. Plus, we have our recruiting analysts. We have Mark Givler. We also have Alex Gleitman, who is going to be doing a little bit of a pregame segment for us on just some of the names to know at today's game. This is going to be one of the biggest games of, not even the season, but the last decade in terms of Ohio State recruiting and the number of players who are visiting, the talent of the players that is visiting, several 5-star defensive ends visiting, and those are the 2023 guys, a bunch of 2024 guys, even some 2025s visiting, lots of current commits as well, including 2024 quarterback Dylan Raiola, the number 1 overall player in the country. When we wrap up at 6 o'clock, one of the things we're going to be doing is Kevin and I are going to be sprinting down to the field to go get photos of all those guys coming into the stadium. But, Tony, this is it feels like, Tony, BuckeyeHuddle.com kind of has all the bases covered for all of your Ohio State football needs.
All of your bases covered for, yes, all of your Ohio State needs. I believe that Alex Gleitman piece is just 22 minutes of him reading the names. It's just all of the names, and there's a bunch of them. 5 stars, 4 stars, 6 stars. I even saw a player listed who has no offers. It's like, how'd that guy get here? But hey, it's a big weekend. Come one, come all, and as long as there's enough seats for everybody, Ryan Day said it this week. There's not going to be a lot of interaction with the players on this trip, but this trip isn't about that. This trip is about showing them what a big game at Ohio State looks like, sounds like, feels like. It's like all 5 senses, and then it's like it's the 6th sense that makes the decision on I want to do this and I like it here. And I think all of your senses here in this game, as long as it's a good game, it's going to be fulfilled. And so it's a very good stage to be on, provided you do the job during the game. And then if you don't, that's when you're like, well, this is why we need you. We did not win, but we would have won if you were here.
Yeah, we had, over the course of the week, done some live shows and had lots of feedback from people concerned about Ohio State's track record in these late night games and, the big non-conference home games. And, they lost to Oregon and lost to Oklahoma and they lost to USC and they lost to Virginia Tech. And it's like, oh, okay, you're going back 13 years at this point. And, in terms of the recruiting piece of that, you look at that Virginia Tech game from 2014, and there were a whole bunch of players that was a big recruiting weekend for Ohio State, and they got a bunch of those guys. It is, you do not have to win the game necessarily to have it be a good recruiting weekend. You definitely do not need to win the game for it to be a big recruiting weekend. This is definitely going to be a big recruiting weekend for Ohio State.
And that Virginia Tech weekend, how many times have we seen photos from that game, from the pregame of that? Doesn't matter that it was a loss. It's still the scene itself was incredible with the night game and the fireworks and everything. So that experience obviously was memorable for a lot of people.
Yeah, and a night game at Ohio State is always kind of a scene. It is. We have probably a difficult time judging what other campuses are like because every time we go to cover a game, it's an Ohio State game, which is sort of definitionally, no matter who you are, whether it's Michigan or Penn State or Rutgers. An Ohio State Rutgers game is a bigger deal than in a Rutgers. I don't know. Do they play Drexel? I don't know. LIU, whatever. Temple, whoever from the East Coast they're playing in that week. So Long Island, yes. It is. Every time we go to Penn State, it feels like Penn State is doing a whiteout for the Ohio State game. That won't be the case this year, but our impression of Penn State is always, wow, this is the craziest atmosphere in college football. And you come to the Ohio State Tulsa game last year, and it's like, wow, this is kind of dead. It is not going to be dead tonight. And if they win, that probably means it's not necessarily going to be dead for Arkansas State next week and Toledo the week after that, and and then you've got Wisconsin, and that might be a primetime game as well. So there are going to be some big games on the schedule for Ohio State this year. Let's take a quick turn to the just the offense for Ohio State, which seems like the baseline expectation for the offense this year is best in the country, maybe the best in the history of college football. And that's just sort of like, well, they'll do that. And it feels like everyone will be like, well, yes, that's what you're supposed to do. What to you is the biggest question on offense going into this season?
Boy, I think there's not like it's like I'm Jim Knowles for the offense. Like I have no concerns, but I would say the running game, but you hear Travion Henderson is a much better back. He's stronger. He's faster. He's reading the defense better. He's setting up his blocks better. The offensive line is a better run blocking offensive line. So it's like, well, that would be the concern, but it sounds like everything's okay. And then, well, CJ Stroud, sophomore slump. I don't think that's like something that you really think about. And the receivers are fine. It's certainly not the tight end. We know it is the year of the tight end. But you go back to, we just kept hearing about the offensive line struggling against the interior of the Ohio State defensive line. And it's the one thing that is, I will believe it when I see it. I need to see it. Not that I don't believe it, but I would like to see it before I'm like, yeah, it's no longer a concern. And we very well may see that. I would not be shocked with something special from Travion Henderson tonight. And then Mayan Williams is getting driven to, like, he doesn't want to be forgotten. He wants to play. So those two guys are going to be feeding off of each other. So in terms of the biggest question mark or concern, I guess it's the running game of the offensive line, although I think stopping Isaiah Foskey in the pass rush is right up there. So it's just the offensive line in general, but like I'm like, oh no, I'm not like that. I think they're good wherever they are.
And it's interesting because Isaiah Foskey is probably going to be going up against DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson. And DeJuan Jones, it feels like you know what you got with DeJuan Jones for the most part. Paris Johnson, it feels like no one is mentioning Paris Johnson's potential concern, and this is his first start at tackle in the college level. So it feels like anytime you have a first-time starter at tackle, it should be a concern, but I don't know whether it's his five-star pedigree as a recruit or whether it's his, what you saw from him at guard last year or just the way the coaches and players are talking about things. It's just like, it seems like that's just not a thing that anyone seems to be worried about.
When you look at him, he does not look like, he's an offensive lineman. He's big. He's 6'6", 300 pounds, but like, he's not fat or like sloppy. Like he looks like an athlete. And when you hear his players, like his teammates, I don't know if it's Luke Whipler or somebody saying like his feet float on the ground to tell you how well he moves. And, but this is still his first start at left tackle. I could see something where like he gives up 3 sacks all season and two of them are tonight, where like, you just, it's a little new. You're going against a first round draft pick. It's different speed than what you're normally facing because the guys are actually going to hit the quarterback. And no matter how much you practice against the guys in practice, they know they can't hit the quarterback. They know they can't, so it's like, is it always all out all the time? I don't know that it is. And tonight it will be. So it's, there may be a little bit of a learning curve, but I think the reason they like Paris Johnson so much is because he is a fast learner and he has the athleticism to handle whatever they give him. But also he's going against somebody that's very, very good. So you're not going to win all of them.
Right. And if you win, this is like a relief pitcher or pitcher in baseball going up against a home run hitter. Barry Bonds, famously fantastic teammate Barry Bonds, used to walk into locker rooms and if a new guy was there and he'd hit a home run off the guy, he'd be like, "I got you." That is a story in the Jeff Pearlman Barry Bonds biography, and and it was like, well, he maybe he was 1 for 8 against him, but he hit a home run, and that's so he got you, and that's sort of what it's like for pass rushers. You can get stopped all night. Like last year, the season opener, for example, Zach Harrison didn't have a huge night statistically, but he beat the tackle on one play, came around the blind side and strip sack. Ball got, I think Haskell Garrett was the one who ran that one in for a touchdown. And, you get a strip sack and a scoop and score. It's like, okay, well, boy, guess what? I couldn't tell you what else Zach Harrison did last year in the Minnesota game, but boy, I could tell you that. So
45 snaps, 1 strip sack, and it's, that's what? 2.1% of the snaps he did something, right? I look to you to do the math.
It's probably a little more. It's like between 2.1 and 2.2. That's fine. We're not here to talk about math, Tony.
Good.
Although speaking of numbers, Oregon football not great. 21-0 Georgia. 8 minutes left in the second quarter, and while we were watching Kevin's story on the tailgating earlier, the Appalachian State UNC final score popped up. Tony, I think I need to apologize to UNC because I was dogging their defense last year, and they only gave up 61 points to App State this week. So they won 63-61, stopped the 2-point conversion in overtime. But I think UNC football, everything's fine.
I think I took the over on that in our play action pools on the Buckeye Huddle message board that we've got going on there. I think I pretty much took the over. I was telling our buddy Spencer Holbrook and Letterman Rowe, just take the over on all North Carolina games all year long for the rest of time. Basically, just take the over, and you can cash in by halftime and you go home. So it's entertaining, but wow.
What if UNC, App State, and Iowa, South Dakota State could meet in the middle somewhere? That seems like that would be a very good football game.
How many points would North Carolina give up to Iowa if they played next week? 17.5. I'll set the over under.
I was just about to say 17. So I think we're correct. Is what that tells me. Michigan. Did you get to watch much of the Michigan game?
Bits and pieces. Cade McNamara did not look good. He was 1 of 5. His first 5 passes for a 61-yard touchdown, but it was just a quick screen out to Roman Wilson, who zipped down the sideline. But no, he did not look great. It was another one of those ugly Michigan things where they're leading 30-0, in the second or third quarter, and it's like, what have you really done? They didn't run the ball all that well, but DJ Turner had a fumble return. It's just one of those, like a lot of what they did last year.
Yeah.
But J.J. McCarthy had a 20-yard touchdown run. I really think, as we talked about earlier in the week, this will be Cade McNamara's last start at Michigan.
Yeah, that felt inevitable when we just heard which game they were going to have which guy with. Hawaii was real bad last week. Hawaii got lit up by Vanderbilt last week. So, and that was at home, and that was week 1. And yeah, that feels like that's not going to go great.
And it was Vanderbilt.
It was Vanderbilt. I'd also like to apologize to NC State for doubting. They are getting preseason hype, and took care of business 21-20 over East Carolina. So that
anytime you're facing these in-state schools, anything can happen to them.
Is East Carolina? Is that? I know it's in Greenville, North Carolina. I know there was a joke there, and I just didn't get there. Sorry. East Carolina State. Yeah, there we go. We got it. All right, we got there. We are right now about 3 hours, a little over 3 hours away from kickoff here at Ohio State, a little under 3 hours. So the team will be showing up in about 50 minutes or so. The team will be coming over, go to Skull Session, then walk over into the stadium. So that'll be about 5:30, give or take. But this has been, we have been doing the countdown to kickoff all day long. I think I posted something on the Buckeye Huddle Twitter account this morning with it was 9.5 hours to kick off, something like that. So we're actually getting a lot closer. One of the reasons I was here very early was College Game Day. ESPN's College Game Day was in Columbus. That is the place they have been more than anywhere else. Lee Corso has picked Ohio State more with the headgear pick than any other school. Ohio State has won more game day games than any other school. But I went to Game Day in 1996. I was there in my freshman year, the first time Lee Corso ever put on a mascot head. That was it was another top 5, I think, matchup with Penn State. I believe both teams were top 5. Ohio State ended up winning that game 38-7. He picked Ohio State by putting on the Brutus Buckeye head, and a tradition was born, still going 26 years later. Wow, I'm old. It is, but I don't know that anyone has, everyone has been to a College Game Day game. So one of the things we're doing this season is, this is a very popular feature we did last year, was just kind of behind the scenes of Ohio State football, taking you to places that you as a fan maybe haven't gone. Like, we're not going to just be like, here's a concession stand. You can buy hot dogs here. We want to, take you places where you might not.
I tweeted out a picture of the concession stand prices for a couple days ago.
I did too. I posted that on our board at one point. That's interesting. But I think people want to know how much they're going to be paying for a 12-ounce beer. Answer: a bunch. But
$1 an ounce.
the goal is to kind of take you to places you don't get to go normally during an Ohio State game. So, last year I took you into the secret room underneath South Stand, which is, photographers are in there and like all the stuff, hey, they store the pyro stuff from the, the pregame stuff down here, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of take you different places you don't normally get to go.
You know what I would love for you to do? You should do like a behind the scenes of the victory bell ringing after the game.
Is there a story there? Maybe. Anyway.
Just think about it. I'm just giving you an idea. I don't need producer credit. Just think about it.
Anyway, so this morning I went over to College Game Day just I'm not up on stage with the guys or anything. Just want to give you sort of a sense. What is it like to actually be there? Is this like Times Square on New Year's Eve? What is the mood? What is the vibe like? It is the audio. You'll hear a lot of College Game Day beforehand or in the background as they're doing the show, and obviously broadcasting that relatively loudly. The start of the segment, I could not have planned it any better. I was waiting for them to not be playing music and just start doing a segment. And so I hit record, and then up on the screen pops Jim Harbaugh. I was like, well, that's a sign. This is going to go great. So here's a look behind the scenes of what it's actually like to go and watch College Game Day at Ohio State.
This is the first in what is going to be a season-long series of videos behind the scenes of Ohio State football, things that most people maybe have not gotten a chance to see in person, so we want to kind of take you behind the scenes. This one, we're literally behind the scenes of College Game Day, the College Game Day program here in Columbus, to shoot their season opening live show. That's the stage up there. You can see a small TV on top of that. There's a big TV on the left. They are currently doing a feature on Jim Harbaugh. Gene Wojciechowski is doing a feature on Jim Harbaugh. It did not go over particularly well with the Ohio State crowd. There's just one Michigan fan here at least, so maybe he's happy. The rest of the Ohio State crowd was not super excited to see old Jim Harbaugh's face up on the screen. But just going to kind of walk you around here, just sort of let you see what the rest of the set and what the rest of the crowd looks like. It just started raining a couple minutes ago, so it actually has thinned out the crowd just a little bit. But we're in the back row of the crowd right now, stage way up there. That, of course, is right by St. John Arena, right across the street from Ohio Stadium. So now you know where we are. Going to walk you kind of around the side of the crowd. There's the game day bus that they bring to all their trips. Lots of people were posing for photos in front of that earlier. Everything about this is a little bit of an event at this point after 20 seasons of of Home Depot sponsorship, but more than 25 seasons of game day going on the road. There is some members of the Ohio State band getting ready, presumably, to play. We're going to go on the other side of the bus here. There is never necessarily a real clear walkway. There's the game day bus. I'll pop the camera out so you can see all the guys smiling, Desmond cackling, even in still photo form. The crowd is kind of wall to wall here. The stage is up there. The stage, you can't get behind the stage to see the faces of the guys. They are sitting with their backs to the crowd, so that you can see the crowd behind it. All the flags are here. There is Old Crimson, the famous Washington State flag that is on the show every single week. And then they have just different stages where they'll do different stuff. Gene Wojciechowski's up on the screen there, but he's also standing right there. You can see him just right in the center of the screen right there. You can see his back as he's talking right now. So now you can see he's on the kind of the right-hand side of the screen, and you can see his report on the left-hand side of the screen. So that is kind of what this is like. College Game Day, coming to College Game Day is kind of one of those things that people do. There's a lot of standing around. It's a little like New Year's Eve in Times Square. There's a lot of standing around between excitement. Yes, you can hear the warm reception that the Jim Harbaugh footage is getting right now. The live footage as they count down to their massive top 5 showdown with Colorado State to open the season. So that is a look a little bit at College Game Day, what it's like when College Game Day is at Ohio State. I'll try and throw some photos of some of the signs that I got earlier, so you can see the signs that were here. But that is a look at what College Game Day is like. We will have a series all season long, kind of taking you behind the scenes of an Ohio State football game, stuff inside the stadium, stuff around campus. a lot of stuff that you guys as Ohio State fans might not get a chance to see. That's what we're here for. So hope you guys enjoyed that one.
So that was a little look behind the scenes of what it's like to actually go to college game day when it's at Ohio State. It's there's a lot of standing around. I did think it was a little like New Year's Eve in Times Square, where there's a lot of waiting around and then a little burst of activity. But that's kind of it's something that's sort of a rite of passage. I think everyone kind of feels like they want to go do that at some point. So there you go. Now you've kind of gotten a sense for that. So I guess let's take a second to sort of reset things right now. We've got we're a little after 4:45. Availability report will come out in about 45 minutes. We'll be able to share that with you as soon as that comes out. We're not expecting anything huge for Ohio State. Ryan Day has sort of led us to believe there's not a lot of real big injury concerns for Ohio State. So that'll be, we'll have that at 5:30. This is also a great time if you're watching to remind you, hey, you should hit the thumbs up button. And if you're watching, also make sure you hit the bell and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the bell, make sure you get notified, because we're planning on doing a long post-game show after this game as well. And win or lose, there should be a whole lot to talk about on that one. It'll be a fun thing. And again, like our pregame show, going to be looping in a bunch of other folks from BuckeyeHuddle.com to kind of provide some insight and analysis in their particular areas of expertise. So that should be a lot of fun.
I'm interested to see how long people will stay up tonight.
It
could be a late night.
We have done some of these post-game shows with on some late nights. The Sugar Bowl is always the one that comes to mind. The Sugar Bowl against Clemson a few years ago, where it was like, boy, this game was really late, and we'll just how long will people possibly want to stay up? And the answer it turns out was real late, and we basically waved the white flag that night before the viewers did.
Yeah, I told my wife I don't know what time I'll be home. It could be 3 or 4. Like, honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah, and they're not kicking us out of the press box until 4 hours after the game, so could be here for a while. But yes, do make sure hit the thumbs up button, hit the bell so you get notified when we do go live for that post-game show. And also, if you have not checked out BuckeyeHuddle.com yet, make sure you do that. Tony, Kevin, and I obviously covering the team for the site, but we've got Alex Gleitman, Mark Givler covering recruiting, and there's a lot of recruiting news that's going to be coming out of this weekend. There, you never want to get too far ahead of yourself, but you may, you always have the possibility of some commitments coming out of a weekend like this. And, the Ohio State is in a pretty good shape right now with the 2023 class, looking to add a few guys in a few different spots. They got 3 big time defensive ends here this weekend. So going to be plenty to talk about there as well. So now that we've talked a little bit about the Ohio State offense, I do want to talk a little bit about the Ohio State defense, specifically Jim Knowles. I mean, Jim Knowles, he's new in town, obviously, this year. So we do not have years and years of track record to know, when Jim Knowles says this, here's what that really means. But, man, the stuff Jim Knowles was saying this week and the way he was discussing his level of confidence, his level of optimism, his level of concern or lack thereof around the team, it was like, boy, this is about as strongly positive as I've heard a coordinator be. And I feel like one way or the other, we're going to learn a lot about Jim Knowles with how this game goes for the defense.
You said optimism. I don't even think it's optimism, because that still implies there's some doubt. Like, I think it's going to go well. It's like it's just he's the confidence and he's just sure. Like that's how he was talking, where it's like, yeah, it's not even optimism, it's not pessimism, it's just I know how this is going to go. And it's like, are you? How can you know that? And I think he feels very good about what he's seen in practice, how the players have taken to the defense, how they've gone about learning it, and the questions that they ask while they're learning it tells him that they know what they're doing. And he's quizzing them all the time in meetings and things like that, and holding them accountable. And players are holding each other accountable. So I think he's been impressed off the field with all of that. And then the results in the film, practices, all he talks about is how the players know what they're doing. They're, as I said before, they're not reacting. They're anticipating. Everything seems to be going well. And now this past 2 weeks, they've been putting in the plan for the Notre Dame game. So it's like they had this big, 75% of the playbook. Then you start just whittling it down to what are they going to do this week? with the idea that you can also do some other things that you've been preparing for, because this is an adaptable defense. That's what he wants from it. Don't have to go into halftime to do your halftime adjustments. You can adjust on the fly and just whatever it takes to make life difficult for the quarterback.
Yeah, and one of the interesting dynamics of this, specifically with Jim Knowles and Notre Dame, Jim Knowles has not coached a defense against Notre Dame, at least recently. Jim Knowles defense, however, has gone against Notre Dame extremely recently. Jim Knowles was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State last year. And in the bowl game, after Jim Knowles had already accepted the defensive coordinator job at Ohio State and, had left the Oklahoma State program, his defense with his players faced Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl and won 37-33. Notre Dame threw the ball all over the field that game, but ran the ball 21 times for 42 yards. 2 yards a carry, and it was Ian Book had 4 carries for -4 yards, so it was not, they had 175 yards, but he got sacked a million times, and so that was the issue. It was they just didn't run the ball against the Oklahoma State defense. It feels like, Jim Knowles, Tanner McAllister, who was on that Oklahoma State defense and is now on the Ohio State defense as a transfer, I think they've been careful to not talk about, oh boy, this is a way better. All the guys here are way better football players than the guys that we used to play with in Oklahoma State. And you're not going to light your old teammates on fire, but I think it's reasonable. You want to look at the recruiting rankings. You want to look at look at the size and speed of the guys on the Ohio State defense versus the Oklahoma State defense. It's reasonable to think you're going to have probably you've maybe got a little more to work with. Safe to say. So when you look at the Jim Knowles defensive scheme working against Notre Dame the last time, and Notre Dame probably with a first-time starter quarterback, you're probably going to be trying to lean on short passes and the run game to win on Saturday night here. I think you can sort of see why Jim Knowles might feel pretty optimistic.
I mean, if you're going to be having your first game as the Ohio State defensive coordinator, wouldn't you want to be going up against a first-time starter at quarterback? I think that's leads into allowing him to do a bunch of different things, and you can be aggressive without being terrified of the quarterback. Like Tyler Buchner is going to get away with some stuff in terms of running the ball, getting scrambling and getting out of the pocket, and even some of the reads in the running game. But I think you have to you feel better about forcing the issue if you're playing him than if he's a fifth-year senior and he's seen it all and he knows what to expect. So I think creating things that, even if he thinks he knows what he's seeing, we've seen this with C.J. Stroud. It took a while to master this defense basically and get to a point where he's comfortable going against it and he's able to, suss out what he thinks is happening. And, you can do that over weeks and months. It's hard to do over the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. And I've gone back and forth to where it's like you just hang back and see if Tyler Buchner can beat you, or you make his life miserable and see what happens that way.
Yeah, and the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, that's kind of an interesting storyline here that we haven't really talked about. Is you constantly hear people talk about adjustments and you got to get into the halftime locker room and make some adjustments. That's one of the things that Jim Knowles is kind of renowned for. He's known as a teacher, and he's known for having a counterpunch. When you get hit in the mouth, having a counterpunch. This feels like a game where what you see in the first quarter might not be representative of what you see the rest of the game. And that's true in a lot of first games of the season. Everyone has had 9 months to sit there and think about, okay, how do we want to do this? What do we want? How do we want to stress what they do? And, a lot of times that's going to work. A lot of times you're going to catch someone off guard. And then the question is, how do you respond? That was something when Jeff Hafley was at Ohio State. Jeff Hafley was great. He was really recognized as being really good at sort of adjusting on the fly, coming up with an answer to your answer, and then putting you back on your heels. That's not something that really was regarded as a real strength the last couple of years under Kerry Combs and Matt Barnes. Among other things, that was one of the things that it was just kind of they had the thing that they were doing, and they didn't necessarily have a counterpunch to your punch. So to me, I'm sure if Notre Dame goes down the field to start the game and scores a touchdown, everyone is going to immediately go into full-blown Chernobyl mode. But you I think you've got to be a little bit patient and sort of see how things play out because, UConn last week was playing Utah State, a game I'm sure you were all hanging on and exactly the way I was. UConn was up 14-0. It was like, oh man, Utah State is terrible. And then they won 48-14. Yeah. Hawaii, another game you were probably all hanging on with me, late night watching Hawaii and Vanderbilt. Hawaii's got a 7-0 lead. It's like, oh man, is this going to be another Vanderbilt East Tennessee State game from the previous year? And then Vanderbilt won 63-10, something like that. I think there's just, in all things, dear listener, I would urge patience and a little understanding and not, not immediately climbing up on the roof the first time someone gets a first down. But it feels like that's even more so the case in a game like this.
Yeah, no different than when we saw South Dakota State and Iowa get out to a 3-3 start, and then Iowa run away with it 7-3. So, yes. But also, Notre Dame's going to come out probably – they've run over this first drive. They've scripted it however many plays, and they've worked on that. And they've been repping it for the last few days in practice, walkthroughs, so that they know what they're doing, so they're comfortable with it. You've got your first-time quarterback, your first-time starter. He's comfortable with what he's being asked to do, and they've designed this to what he's good at doing. So, then you adjust to that, and you make that more difficult for them to do, and then it's Notre Dame's turn. And once they get, I'll be interested to see what happens once they're no longer in the script, assuming they do script.
Yeah, that's always kind of where the game really starts. It feels like everyone has the plan until they get punched in the mouth. The old Mike Tyson line. That's kind of what the second drive is. Okay, now what? Or the third drive. Now what? We are an hour in already, and want to kind of just take a second to reset here. It's 5:00 here in Columbus. Kickoff 2.5 hours away. We are 30 minutes away from the team coming in. They are probably headed over to Skull Session over in St. John Arena in about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. They will, of course, go across. Someone will give kind of a short speech. Generally, those are, a sentence or two. It's not, you don't get the Gettysburg Address in there. They'll play the fight song. They'll do the team walk over from St. John Arena over into the Horseshoe. That'll happen about 5:30 or so, 5:30. Also, when we will be able to release the availability report for the Buckeyes, kind of let you know who's out, who's a game time decision. So that'll be coming in about half an hour. In the meantime, feel free to ask us any questions you've got in the comments. We'd be happy to answer questions as we head into the second hour of the show. Kevin is laughing because I'm guessing we have 100,000 questions. Yes.
I got a good one.
Okay, Kevin. Let's have a good question.
Tom, why are you wearing the opposing team colors?
Somehow I knew. I threw this on. I threw the hat on in the just grabbed it and was like, well, it's going to rain and maybe down in the field and my hair is going to be just like be a drowned rat.
Always worried about your hair.
Yes, that's me. Famously hung up on my looks. And I'm like, I'll just grab a hat. And I'm like, well, I didn't wear a Dodgers hat because I know Kevin is still in mourning after the Dodgers dropped 2 of 3 to the Mets this week. But so I didn't want to do that. And it was like, well, I'll grab a Hartford Whalers hat because, who could, that's not even a team anymore. Right. Who could possibly find that objectionable?
You can't get mad at the whale.
And then I was walking around the tailgating lots and looking at, I actually said to Kevin, I think as we were walking through the tailgating lots, I looked and saw the Notre Dame people in green shirts. And I said, people are not going to like the fact that I'm wearing a green hat like that. Sorry. I got to tell you, didn't even think about it. So yes. So there you go. So sorry to disappoint everyone. Tony's wearing blue.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so do we have any other questions, or should we?
Devin would like to know, who do you think the punt returner will be?
So Devin's question is, who do we think the punt returner will be? To me, I think the clear answer has to be Jackson Smith and Jigba, and we've talked about why it's Jackson Smith and Jigba. Because there are other guys that have had back there. There are other guys that would love to be the punt returner who have been bothering Parker Fleming to be the punt returner, but it feels like it's Jackson Smith and Jigba. Why is that?
Yeah, he's the surest-handed guy, and in a big game like this, especially if the weather is going to be a little wet, where you just want the guy with the surest hands to catch the ball. Now, they have shared duties and punt return duties in games before, where 2 different guys will get, like Garrett Wilson would and KJ Hill or something like that, where it's 2 different guys. And so if there is a second guy, I would expect it to be Cameron Martinez, redshirt sophomore nickel. And he's the guy that has been pestering Parker Fleming to get into the game as the punt returner. Electric return guy. Well, we assume he's an electric option quarterback back in high school, famously a 9-minute touchdown highlight film. And so he wants the ball in his hands. And he's a guy that maybe when you need I would say maybe if you need a shot in the arm. However, do you really want to risk a shot in the arm, in a game like this? That's more of a, you get Arkansas State or you get Toledo and see what you can do there. We're going to have to hold off on Notre Dame and say, let's just get the ball back and give it to the offense.
Quick update from the game down in Atlanta.
28-0.
Georgia 28, Oregon 3.
Oh,
so I can't ever remember seeing a team from Atlanta blow a 28-3 lead. So I'm sure the game's over, right? That's how this works.
Tom, actually, I do think this one is over.
Yeah. Well, this one might be over.
That field goal is going to go a long way.
Yeah. Tom Brady is not walking through that door for Oregon. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, he's still on the Masked Singer.
Okay. I love that. That's the worst kept secret in the history of the world. Yes. So let's just kind of take a second to talk about the scene around campus again, because we're gonna have an update from Alex Gleitman on recruiting. We talked all about the recruiting piece earlier. We're going to have an update from Alex in a minute with just some names to know. But just before we get to that, I just wanted to sort of set the scene for people on exactly what it's like here, because that's kind of the job. Like that was kind of brought home to me in the 2020 season when there were no fans here. It was like, well, what's the job? Well, the job is to tell people what it's like to be there for the people who can't be there. So if you're watching this, odds are you are not here. So what is the vibe around campus right now? How, what is the activity level around campus? What is it like?
Yeah, it's buzzing, and it's buzzing earlier than normal. Like eventually it always buzzes. But as I said earlier, I got here 5.5 hours before kickoff, and it felt like I was here like 2 hours before kickoff because the place is already populated. Fans are everywhere. Tailgates were hopping, and a little bit of a drizzle didn't matter. Like it's loud. The energy is, it's exactly what you want. There's people walking all over the place. They're already around the stadium gates. It's like, go do something else, but it's like, no, they're just taking photos and really just soaking it all in and taking it in. And that's kind of what we were telling people to do during the week. Like, get there early, experience it, have a memory, and then, be loud before the game, during the game, after the game, have a good time.
And, that game day experience, the same way the fans should come in and experience it. That's the whole point of a recruiting weekend like this, because you can't, coming on a random weekend in June, you can spend a lot of time talking to the coaches and getting to know people and, hanging out in Ryan Day's office for an hour and talking to him. That is not something you can do on a Saturday game day. So the whole reason this is a big recruiting weekend is so that these guys can experience this kind of weekend.
I don't care if you want to tweet at recruits and stuff like that to encourage them to come to your school. Everybody does it. Like, this is more effective than that. Like, show out as a crowd and be loud and make your voice heard this way. And that's so much more effective than social media.
And also I will supersede Tony here and say, don't tweet at recruits. Don't do it. Don't do that. Anyway, someone who talked to recruits quite a bit is Alex Gleitman. He is one of our recruiting analysts at BuckeyeHuddle.com. I had him on the morning show earlier in the week to talk about some of the big names to know for this weekend, because there are some big names coming in for Ohio State. 3 defensive linemen in the class of 2023, plenty of guys in 2024, 2025. This is a big recruiting weekend. So we had Alex put together just basically, you're not going to know everyone on the list. You don't have to know everyone on the list. Who are just kind of a handful of names that Ohio State fans should really know of recruits who are going to be on campus this weekend.
Thanks, guys. Really excited. It's Ohio State game day. We've been waiting a long time for this. One of the biggest matchups of the season. And that comes with one of the biggest recruiting weekends for Ohio State, not just of, the season to come, but the entire year. When you think about the summer, back to the winter, they had the junior days and things like that. I mean, this is just, forget this year. I mean, in recent memory, this is just one of the biggest weekends. And the list is so long. There's so many big time names, ton of 4- and 5-star guys across the 23, 24, 2025 recruiting classes. But we're going to focus on 3 players to watch today, all in the 2023 class and all at the defensive end position. The first one we're going to talk about is Keon Keeley from Berkeley Prep down in Tampa. I mean, this kid was a Notre Dame commit just a few weeks back, and Keon now has decommitted from the Irish. He's focused on Alabama. He's focused on Ohio State. Some people feel maybe Florida's a dark horse, but I think it's going to be either the Crimson Tide or the Buckeyes. Ohio State had him back on campus in March. The plan was always to get him to Columbus for an official visit for this weekend against Notre Dame, and that's exactly what they're doing. This is their opportunity to show Keon that Ohio State is the place for him, and that regardless of if he goes to another visit to Tuscaloosa, he's already been on 2 unofficial visits there this year. If he goes on an official there, Ohio State wants to make that visit insignificant. They want to make themselves the front runner after this weekend and leave no doubt to the 5-star top 10 player that Columbus is the future home for him. The second defensive end we're going to talk about is Damon Wilson, another Floridian who's up here on an official visit. He's kind of been an enigma to some extent. I mean, there's been, the Florida schools, there's Georgia, there's Alabama, like a lot of SEC schools have been mentioned. I've been hearing that Georgia may be the team to beat for Damon Wilson, but communication has been constant with Ohio State, and he really wanted to make this visit to Columbus for the Notre Dame game. He confirmed to me earlier this week that he was going to be on campus. And again, Ohio State has done a really good job up to this point, but this official visit is their, it's kind of their Shark Tank moment. You come into the Shark Tank, are you getting the sale or are you not? Come on, Mark Cuban, throw a bid to me here. It's a great opportunity for Larry Johnson to do what he does best, for Ryan Day to do what they do best. And I think for Jim Knowles to show what this defense is capable of and to show how that defensive line, how they're creative with that defensive line, how they rotate those guys in, how they use them in a variety of different ways, almost like a Swiss Army knife, that entire unit. And if they're able to get after the quarterback and make some big time plays in tonight's game, I think that's going to make a really big impact on Damon Wilson outside of everything he's going to see off of the field. Finally, we're going to talk about a guy who's not in on an official visit, but it's an unofficial visit. Mateo Ugalele from St. John Bosco in Bellflower, California. He made his official visit to Ohio State in June. He's been to campus before on unofficial visits. So him coming on his own dime speaks volumes to me about his interest in Ohio State. I had the Buckeyes as the team to beat coming out of the summer, but I said we were really just kind of getting this one started. Alabama, Oregon, USC, they're all in this one big time. They're all going to, I'd be shocked if all 3 of those didn't get visits the rest of the way. Ohio State would love to get him back one more time as well if they could. But they'll take having him back on campus for this game. And, kind of same thing here. Proof is in the pudding. He's seen everything he needs to see off the field. He loves what Ryan Day's about, loves what Larry Johnson's about. They've kind of experienced that off the field life. What is it like on game day? What is it like being a player at Ohio State? And the Buckeyes are going to have a chance to show Mateo Ugalele, everything that I just talked about. So those 3 defensive ends, that's a huge position of need. Getting one of them would be an absolute grand slam home run in the 9th inning for Ohio State to close out this recruiting class. Getting any more of them, 2 or 3, Ohio State's going to have a case for one of the top, 2 classes in the country, if not the top class in the country, if they're able to get multiple players out of Damon Wilson, Mateo Ugalele, and Keon Keeley.
All right. Well, thank you to Alex for that. Alex is always a fantastic resource on that, and he has been tracking every single player who's going to be visiting for the Notre Dame week on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. He is one of our recruiting analysts, recruiting insiders, also constantly turning out good information from this year's team. Turns out if you talk to people who know a lot about recruiting, well, they also know a lot about the stuff about this year's team. So Alex, a fantastic resource for our members at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And while we were in that package, they started playing the music out on the stadium. In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins playing, so you missed Tony doing the air drum to the drum solo. Yep. So it was probably good that we were in a pre-tape package there.
We can do it live. Just tell them to hit it again, and I'll do it.
So instead of literally, let's do literally anything except for that. Right. But okay. I think at the top of my list of things I'd like to do right now is hear from some of our viewers. You guys have obviously been asking us questions. If you are watching, please hit that thumbs up button. make sure you hit the bell. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you get notified after the game when we start going live for our post-game coverage. But Kevin, our producer, is behind the camera right now. Kevin, what do the viewers want to know?
Xander D says over under 2.5 sacks tonight for OSU.
Xander D wants to know over under 2.5 sacks for Ohio State tonight.
I'm going over on that one. I think if it's not, it's because they've pressured him out and he's escaped and gotten back to the line of scrimmage, picked up some yards. I think if they are not pressuring him, then something has gone wrong. So I'm going over on that.
I think you're going to have, if they don't have 2.5 sacks, one of a few things has happened. Number one, Notre Dame is able to run the ball consistently, and that's going to, that's bad news for Ohio State. I don't think they're going to be able to do the quick game thing that a lot of teams will try against Ohio State, just get the ball out real quick. Because Ohio State, it feels like they're kind of.
I think that has to be part of the plan if there's no sacks. Like
yeah,
you can't just be blocking them.
Right. Well, I mean, you're gonna block them, but I mean, to our point from our conversation from earlier, you only need to get him a few times.
Yeah.
If he's dropping back and throwing 45 passes and Ohio State sacks him 3 times, that's not a crazy number.
No, you tell me 3.5, I might take the under and stay away from it.
Yeah. I think 3 is about right. 2.5 is not a bad line. But yeah, I think that's.
What about the other way?
Notre Dame sacks on CJ Stroud?
Yeah.
2.5 is probably a decent number as well. I think you might. How much is Notre Dame going to press, I guess, is my question. Because I feel like Ohio State, given Notre Dame's receivers, Ohio State may feel a little more comfortable pressing those corners up, taking away some of those quick hitters, and then maybe that makes you make Tyler Buckner hold the ball a little longer. Are Notre Dame's corners going to feel super happy, comfortable pressing up against Marvin Harrison or Jackson Smith-Njigba? Yeah, I don't know about that.
I think I see a bit of the short passing game that Ohio State can do and likes to do, a lot of the wide screens and things like that, to where there's really almost no pass rush for those. 2.5, I would probably. It's just a really good number on sacks. So it's like 2 doesn't sound like many at all.
Right.
3 is like, well, is Ohio State really going to give up 3 sacks? Like, they are notorious for giving up more sacks than top programs should. But when you throw the ball 35, 40 times a game, like, you're going to give up more sacks than other programs.
Super chat from Mike Farino. Any word if Malachi Tony was able to make it? I know Alex had said he might come with Ennis. I don't know.
Super chat asking if Malachi Tony has made it. I have not heard a definitive answer on that. And Kevin and I, as soon as the show's done, Kevin and I are going to be headed down to the field, and we'll be shooting photos of all the recruits coming in, and we'll be able to give you a real definitive list a little later on when we actually see. I have not heard whether Malachi Tony was able to come up from Florida with Brandon Ennis. Brandon Ennis is going to be here. A whole bunch of those 2023 commits are going to be here, but I have not specifically heard on Malachi Tony. I can.
We'll keep.
Yeah, we will check. And Kevin, yeah. Kevin will. Let's transition you to a little Buckeye Huddle sales pitch. Kevin can just reach out to one of our experts and directly and see if either Mark or Alex has actually spoken to Malachi Tony about that, because that's a real possibility. Alex has been tracking this stuff very closely, and when we end up talking about recruiting a lot. But I don't ever attempt to portray myself as a recruiting expert, because I don't. I have a guy for that. In fact, I have 2 guys for that. No. There you go. Well, let me tell you with a great degree of certainty, no Malachi Tony this weekend. Is that because Alex just texted Kevin back? Who's to say? But if hypothetically, if he did, hey, we've got a guy for that. I've got a recruiting guy. In fact, I have 2, Mark and Alex.
You're not going to give me credit for mindlessly scrolling on my phone looking for the answer?
Candy Crush. That didn't help at all.
High score, baby.
Yeah, so no Malachi Tony this weekend. Hey, look at that. Like we drew it up.
That's service.
This is what you do.
Did you plant that question, Kevin?
I paid the $5 super chat, yes.
Well, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the question, and thank you to Alex for answering that for us. This is, we have a guy. We have recruiting guys. we have X's and O's guys. We're going to get to one of our X's and O's guys in just a few minutes. Devin Radcliffe has a really insightful piece on just some of the schematic stuff you're going to want to look at. We'll get to that in about 5 minutes, but I do want to get to a couple more questions before we do get to Devin's piece.
Crystal Moore Pottery, who is a Notre Dame fan, said, don't underestimate Tyler Buckner.
Don't underestimate Tyler Buckner. I agree with that. We've talked about the dangerousness of his legs, but this is also a guy who was the number 71 player in his class, the 21 class overall. So a highly sought after quarterback that had offers from everybody. Everybody wanted him. So he's not just some bum who beat out some other bum. These are really good bums, basically. But he's a dual threat guy, but don't mistake that as he can't throw. It's, we joke about Iowa. This isn't Iowa. Like, this is a guy who, you're starting as a second-year guy at Notre Dame. You're pretty good at that point. And so, no, I'm expecting him to make plays. I'm just also expecting Ohio State's defense to have some success against a guy in his first start. I don't think that's unreasonable.
No, and it feels like if Tyler Buckner has to be the guy to beat Ohio State, Notre Dame is probably not beating Ohio State. Tyler Buckner probably, I picked Notre Dame to score 21 points. That's not a bad showing against what should be a pretty good Ohio State defense this year. I think there are people who maybe had them even in the mid to high 20s in our staff picks. But I don't know that Tyler Buckner is going to light Ohio State up for 42 points tonight. And, if the Irish can run the ball, okay, then maybe you can get to the 30s or something like that. If they can't run the ball, or you're not running the ball consistently, then I think the combination of young quarterback, but also just there is not a Jackson Smith and Jigba on Notre Dame's team. There might not be a Marvin Harrison on Notre Dame's team.
There isn't.
So, you're asking a young quarterback to do a lot. And I think you've seen very talented young quarterbacks who can do some things, but can't necessarily win the game entirely by themselves. Like I think back to the first start for Terrell Pryor, first game where Terrell Pryor took over for Todd Beckman at one point in the USC game in 2008. And, Todd Beckman wasn't doing anything because he was just sort of a little bit of a statue. And so it was okay. So now they're going to put in Terrell Pryor, and Terrell Pryor with that super athletic USC defense, first downs with his legs, was like, oh man, now they're cooking with gas. And then that stopped working. And so you can do it and you can make plays, but can you make enough plays to keep up with the Ohio State offense? That's kind of the question for me tonight.
I also think we are making some assumptions about the Jim Knowles defense. We're sizable assumptions that it's going to be very good. And so we may be wrong about that. At this point, there's no reason to think think that everybody's lying to us and that Jim Knowles is completely selling ill-gotten goods based on what he's saying and the talent on hand. Like, there's going to be improvement. As long as it's competent, there's improvement. And that was something that was missing last year, just sound, competent defense. And that's, at the very least, even if you're not doing all these bells and whistles, like, as long as you're where you're supposed to be, that's an improvement.
It's like the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. Yeah. That's the Ohio State defense last year. Was like, oh boy, I may have stabbed the patient. Is that bad?
First do harm.
Answer yes. So we are about to, first of all, just want to read a tweet from Bruce Feldman. Nebraska really struggling with FCS North Dakota. Huskers tied 7-7 at halftime and only had the ball for a little over 9 minutes in the first half. I'm not the world's biggest time of possession fan. I may be the world's smallest time of possession fan. That's still like, that is indicative of not great things. One thing that is indicative of great things, the presence of Devin Radcliffe. That is never my transition to asking you a question. Never. You should know that by now. Devin Radcliffe, one of our three X's and O's gurus. We talked earlier about Mark Givler and Alex Gleitman being our recruiting gurus at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Devin Radcliffe, Justin Whitlatch, and Ross Fulton are X's and O's gurus at BuckeyeHuddle.com. They are very knowledgeable, very insightful. So we asked Devin, just kind of give us a little bit of a schematic preview of the Ohio State Notre Dame game. You mentioned the new Jim Knowles defense. That's probably going to be kind of a storyline here. So just what should people know kind of heading into this Ohio State Notre Dame game if you had to ask your smart football friend to sort of explain the game to you, here's your smart football friend, Devin Radcliffe.
Thanks, guys. So I'm here today to discuss what we could potentially see this coming Saturday night season opener, Ohio State and Notre Dame. Most of my experience has been on the defensive side of the ball. Spent a good chunk of time studying Jim Knowles' defense this offseason in preparation for him taking over the Ohio State defense. And some things I'm personally going to be looking for, and I think that you guys could be looking for as well, is, and I'll work front to back because my philosophy is if you follow me on the message boards, is it all starts up front. And what does the defensive line play look like this year compared to years past? The past few years, you've seen more of a get up the field and try to create negative plays with the defensive line. For better or worse, they've obviously made plays in the backfield, created some negative plays, but it's also been to the detriment as well. We saw teams like Oregon and in the game last year take advantage of the defensive line's aggressiveness to get up the field. So what's that going to look like? We heard Larry Johnson not too long ago talk about the big thing this adjustment or schematic adjustment or philosophy change really has been block destruction with the defensive front, where they're really wanting to destroy the blocking scheme more than just get up the field and look to make those tackles and sacks. So I want to see how well the defensive line looks first and foremost in adjusting to that philosophy that Jim Knowles brought with him. Second, I'm looking just following defense front to back. Second, what do the linebackers look like as a result of this change in philosophy of defensive line play? Are they cleaner to the ball? Are they playing at the second level, not really looking to make run-throughs? Are they going to be scraping side to side? Are they going to have to be more pluggers? How involved in the coverage are they? When Coach Hafley came in, he had a really simplified coverage. It made it really easy on the linebackers to be run-first players, as they really just had to drop to a spot on the field. And those spots changed, of course, based on game plan or coverage adjustment, but it made it really easy for linebackers to play run first. But in Jim Knowles' scheme and what he's done at Oklahoma State and before that Duke, those linebackers got to have some more coverage responsibility than we've typically seen the past few years from the Ohio State linebackers. So how well do they adjust to that? Third, again, just keep going. Corners, obviously. How well do they handle, they'll be back on the island, a lot less spot drop cover 3, I'm guessing. We'll see a lot more man coverage and a lot more matching zone coverage than they've run the past few years, really going back to Chris Ash, I think. So none of these guys are around for Chris Ash, obviously. So we may not have seen any of that pattern match style defense since Chris Ash or thinking aloud, Greg Schiano employed some of that as well. So how well do they handle that? And again, as we've heard before, and Coach Knowles said himself, safety-driven defense. How well do those safeties adjust to being a real primary force player in the defense between the adjuster and the bandit, or rotating, getting the free safety down in the box, and some of the stuff that Coach Knowles calls and does with his defense to get his free safeties in the run fit and change up which ones are in the run fit. So those are 3 things that I'm going to be watching for on the defense. Just to give you a couple of thoughts. In terms of game plan, how are they going to handle the tight end? Obviously, Mayer, from everyone talks about him, he's going to be a first-round draft pick, probably the best, if not one of the best tight ends in college football. How are they going to handle him? He was a big force in the bowl game against Oklahoma State. Even though Jim Knowles wasn't there, it was still his structured defense. So Notre Dame coaching staff's kind of got a head start on how to prepare for this game, and has had all offseason to really dig into Coach Knowles stuff. And again, he's been a D coordinator for a long time, so his film's out there. So they've had all offseason to figure out a way to try to take advantage of some of those matchup problems that the tight end could cause. Another thing I'm going to be looking for is what does Notre Dame do offensively? Just kind of in general, do they try and slow it down? First game starting quarterback, huge game. Can they play ball control? Coach Freeman obviously played for Coach Tressel. Does he try and play Tressel ball back in Columbus? Keep the ball out of the Ryan Day's offense, C.J. Stroud's hands. Is he able to do that? Play good special teams, play good defense. Speaking of which, Notre Dame's defense, what is it going to look like exactly? Is it going to be Marcus Freeman's defense continued? How much is Al Golden his new defense coordinator coming back to college ball, how much the defense looks like his. Ryan Day did have a look at Cincinnati's defense when Freeman was there. And so this isn't the first time Ryan Day has seen a unique defense like what Marcus Freeman uses. And again, that goes back to how much is Al Golden involved in this defense and the structure of the defense. Does Al Golden try and take away some of the explosives of Ohio State's offense, like we saw Cincinnati do against Bama in the bowl game this past season, and force Ohio State to hand the ball off and be patient handing the ball off, going all the way down the field. So just a couple of thoughts from the Notre Dame side of things.
All right. Well, thank you to Devin for putting that together for us. I think the concept of block destruction was maybe my biggest takeaway there. That sort of fits in with the kill and spill thing that I always talk about with Ross Fulton, one of our other X's and O's gurus at BuckeyeHuddle.com. I think that represents a pretty significant change of philosophy for the Ohio State defense.
Well, and I remember watching, it would have been a decade ago, Larry Johnson film or video from like ESPN or whatever, talking about what he wants his defensive line to do. And he would say, like, I just want them to go get the quarterback. And if the running back has the ball, get him on the way. Like, on your way to the quarterback, tackle the ball. And so that's kind of what they've brought here, or what he brought here and what he's done. But this is a lot of bit different of, it's no longer just get upfield. It's occupying the offensive line, ruining what they're trying to do, blowing up their zones or whatever it is they're trying to do, so that you disrupt things that way, or you force the running back into a place where you want to go, kind of like, catching a mouse or something as you're trying to steer something, or herding. I don't want to say herding cats. That's more difficult, but just it's different now. When I asked Larry Johnson a couple weeks ago, like, what are you doing? Are you doing something differently on the defensive line? He's like, yes. And I'm like, do you want to tell us about it? And he said, no. But then Jim Knowles has also said it's not always going to be like that. It's not just that. They will do what they've always done as well.
So it is now 5:30. 5:30 means, first of all, 2 hours to kick off. 5:30 also means time for us to release the availability report. And there's news on here. There's a little bit of good news. Mm-hmm. I guess there's a lot of good news because there's only 4 names on here, right. And 2 of them were ones we knew about before. Mitchell Melton, Evan Pryor out. You knew that those guys are both probably out for the season at this point, so that's not a surprise. The only other player out, backup, walk-on defensive back, Lloyd McFarquhar. Only one game-time decision, Julian Fleming. And you feel terrible for Julian Fleming, who is just – it's like if he could just stay healthy. I would love to see what he can do. He's a game-time decision. We'll keep an eye on him during pregame warm-ups. What was maybe a little bit notable to me was a name that's not on that list, which is a different wide receiver.
Yeah, Cam Babb, who had a setback in camp, and we were told he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. And I think we assumed that meant a couple of games, but maybe it only meant a couple of weeks of practice. And we saw him soon after running around, jogging, looked good, was dressed for all of these practices. So it's still a little bit of a pleasant surprise that he is not listed. Now, will he play? That's another question. And, Julian Fleming, remember, he was a game-time decision in the spring game as well because of there's a little bit of rain or the slick footing because he tweaked something earlier. I wonder if will that come into play where it's like, well, the footing's not ideal, so depending on the injury, let's hold you out. But Cam Babb, great to see. Great to not see his name on the list, a guy who missed 2018, 2019, played in all but one game in the 2020 season, did not catch a pass, missed all of last year with another knee injury. I think that's 4 ACL tears total, 1 in high school, 3 at Ohio State. So if he can get out there and play tonight, that would be awesome. But just because you're not on the list doesn't mean you will play. And also, we've seen guys that, it's accurate, that list, but sometimes there's some additions, some subtractions where it's like, why wasn't that on the list?
Yeah, I remember Seven Banks early last season was not on the list at one point and just didn't play, and it was like, what? Yeah. What? We do have a super chat.
We do have another super chat from Mike Farino asking if the Bosa to be here as part of the 24 Ohio State players that are playing in the league who are expected to be in the building?
I have not. The question was whether the Bosa's or Chase Young, who are part of the 24 Ohio State players who are expected to be in the building. I have not heard anything one way or the other.
I stopped listening at LeBron James.
There was a Charger scout up here. We could have asked him. He would probably know, but yeah, he walked away. But yeah, so we'll try and get that information for you. As
Preseason is preseason over now?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
this
like,
is the,
what are you going to do?
Week. Yeah, this is the week when there's not an NFL game on Sunday, which is why there's a Florida State LSU game on Sunday. So no NFL tomorrow. So it would make sense if guys are going to come back, this would be the week they would come back. I just have not heard specifically about those guys. Before we get, and we're going to get moving pretty soon because it is starting to fill up here a little bit. And we keep having people walk past us. I do want to just kind of touch on the wide receiver unit a little bit. Marvin Harrison in, Jackson Smith-Njigba in, Emeka Egbuka in. Those guys are all playing, all not on the availability report. We talked about Cam Babb earlier. You could put Jaden Ballard on that list. You could put Xavier Johnson on that list. Julian Fleming, kind of a question mark, game time decision. Whose numbers does it impact the most? Who maybe has a bigger impact now than he would have had Julian Fleming been 100% good to go?
I think if you look at a guy like Emeka Egbuka, who is one of those top four with Julian Fleming, I think it impacts him where he's going to see more snaps. And Marvin Harrison is himself like the lone X, even though everybody plays. They can play all these positions, but I think those two, Fleming and Egbuka, like they're going to be. We've been talking all along, like they'll be sharing reps, and whether that's completely accurate, I think that's the guy who benefits the most. And I think that's if you're going to have somebody step in, he's not a bad one. You're replacing the top receiver in the 2020 recruiting class with the top receiver in the 2021 recruiting class.
Yeah, that depth is never really a big concern with Brian Hartline in that wide receiver room. And it's amazing. You look at Jackson Smith-Njigba, who feels like he just got here. Feels like we were just watching him in that first practice in 2020, and now already he's heading into what is likely to be his final season. We are heading into what is likely going to be our final few minutes here as we are sort of wrapping things up here. The Buckeyes should be, can't see down the field. I think the Buckeyes should be headed in momentarily over from Skull Session. We are kind of getting into the nitty gritty of the game.
The gates are open.
Just to give you, the gates are open. Fans are in the stands now, starting to come in. Just to give you kind of a quick rundown of what we're expecting to be doing over the next 2 hours as we sort of count down to kickoff. As soon as we're done here, Kevin and I are going to be going down to the field. We're shooting photos of the recruits, so I know you guys. There were a lot of questions about recruits and a lot of questions about former Buckeyes who will be here. I remember that's always. These are always the games where when you got the former Buckeyes here, and you've got the recruits here. That's when you get. I remember taking a picture of Paris Johnson walking into the stadium with Orlando Pace, and it's like, boy. I bet that helps sell a little bit. That you've got a guy who finished second in the Heisman, guy who was an NFL Hall of Famer, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that is that you would think that would help sell a little bit. You got a bunch of defensive linemen here, a bunch of defensive edge rushers in visiting today. If Chase Young is here or Nick Bosa, sounds like Joey Bosa probably not, but we'll that's going to be a big story as well. So. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I guess we should throw our score predictions out there. Mm-hmm. I went 35-20 Ohio State. You went?
I went 42-21 Ohio State. And Kevin, what was your? Kevin says 42-20. He got prices righted. I beat him.
That's correct.
By 1 point. So
we're only counting your score.
There you go. So that'll do it. We really appreciate all you guys being here for joining us for the pregame fun. We will be back after the game. If you were watching and you enjoyed this, we're going to have the postgame shows are always. There's a lot more to talk about on the postgame shows because we finally have seen a lot of this stuff for real. So make sure you like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you get notified. We should be doing a post-game show pretty soon after the clock hits zero. Yeah. Don't assume that we're going to be here, an hour and a half after the game like we were at points last season. Assume we're going to be on the air pretty soon after the clock hits zero. So we'll see you guys all. We will have a full team. You will not necessarily see Tony and I immediately after the game, but the full team from Buckeye Huddle will be there after the game to break everything down for you. Can't wait to see you there. Check out BuckeyeHuddle.com for all sorts of fun during the game, and then we'll see you here after the game.